We'll we're also going to record this if that's all right with everybody. Many people have said they couldn't come and really wanted to hear it, so we'll be setting the recording in motion. Um, we first started hearing about Anthony back in the fall, and he has really been making the rounds, sharing his story. It's a compelling witness, and we're just thrilled, Anthony, to have you with us. Let me introduce to everybody those that may not know her yet, but Kate Newman, our outreach coordinator, is our tech guru for this webinar. Kate, you have a few things to tell us about?
Yes, hi. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We are so thrilled to have the Lieutenant Colonel here with us and all of you, of course. The For the duration of the conversation that Mark and Anthony will be having, we're going to ask everyone to stay muted and, in fact, to not put anything in the chat. If you have a question, maybe write it down and remember it. We always save at least the last 30 minutes. Often we will go longer for audience questions. And we invite you to raise your hand at that time and share once we let you know. But we find it can be kind of distracting and take away from listening to this, from everyone being able to really absorb everything that the speaker is sharing if we're posting stuff in the chat in the meantime. So I am going to turn that off. But otherwise, we look forward to this conversation and to having all of your questions at the latter half of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. Let me just say a word or two about Voices for Justice in Palestine. We stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. That is our mission. We support them in their struggle for freedom, dignity, and equal rights. We want peace for all those living between the river and the sea, but we know that peace can never be genuine or enduring without justice. Hence our name, Voices for Justice in Palestine, and also today's webinar. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, and interfaith. We do our work through community education, through panels, through retreats with congregations and other groups, teach-ins, and webinars such as this one today. We advocate for peace and justice with our congressional representatives, and we are active on numerous media platforms. We are member supported, so we invite you to support our work with your time and your talent and with your financial resources as you are able. A warm thank you to all who have been able to support us. We count on your support and look forward to continue serving you. And in that spirit, let me introduce the chair of our board, Burhan Ganayem. Burhan is here, and it's been our normal practice for Burhan to bring a greeting from the board. So, Burhan.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Kate. You guys keep this organization running, and I appreciate you all. I do not want to take too long, but I wanted to welcome all of you for our webinar today. And I also wanted to welcome Colonel or Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar. I just came back from the Middle East, and I saw my family in Jordan is getting really, really bad back in Palestine. This talk is timely about what is happening back in Palestine, and our work is necessary and important. So welcome, and thank you for joining us and supporting Voices for Justice in Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, Burhan. Now it's my honor to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar. Anthony is a retired U.S. Army Green Beret who served for 25 years, including 12 combat deployments across the Middle East and Asia. He's a highly decorated veteran. He earned the Purple Heart and Bronze Star for Valor. In 2025, he traveled to Gaza while working under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, excuse me, where he witnessed firsthand the devastating reality of Israel's assault on the Palestinians. What he saw compelled him to resign and to become a whistleblower. Lieutenant Colonel Aguilar will speak about what he witnessed, the moral line he refused to cross, and why he chose truth over silence. Anthony, a warm welcome to you. We have great admiration for your moral courage and your integrity, and looking forward to opportunities to hear further from you. So, a warm welcome from Voices for Justice in Palestine, and the floor is yours. We look forward to hearing your story.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I want to start by saying that I really appreciate the opportunity to share my experience and spread the word of what I witnessed in Gaza firsthand. And I'd also like to say that I too stand with Palestine, stand with the Palestinians in their fight against oppression and their fight for freedom and equality and a voice. And I stand on the side of humanity. And that's my position in all that I do and why I am continuing to speak out, and I will continue to do so. So where my story began, I did not go to Gaza as a quote unquote humanitarian or part of a humanitarian organization, nor would I have considered myself an activist. I had just retired from 25 years in service in March of 2025, so I've not even been retired a year yet. 2 months into my retirement, I got a phone call from UG Solutions, which is here in North Carolina. They're a small contracting company, recruiting me specifically because of my special operations background to serve under the GHF to distribute humanitarian aid into Gaza. That's the first time I had heard of the GHF or UG Solutions or a humanitarian aid mechanism outside of the UN or UNRWA. So I looked it up, did some research, and I saw that Palestinians are starving. There is a famine. People are hungry. Food and aid are not going in, and that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation would be allowed to go in. And I wanted to be a part of helping. I wanted to be a part of providing my skills and my experience to helping people, in this case, particularly helping, feeding, and providing aid, life-saving aid to Palestinians. And that's why I went. During the time that I was there and what I witnessed on the ground tactically with the design of the distribution sites, the tactics employed by not only the IDF, but the UG's solutions contractors, the violence, the aggression, the war crimes, the violations of international humanitarian law, and the violations of Geneva Convention. And then from the aspect of humanitarian aid has 4 sacred principles that all humanitarian organizations abide by and all humanitarian aid must be accomplished through. And this isn't just a philosophy, it's also codified in international humanitarian law. And that humanitarian aid, humanitarian assistance must be unilateral, meaning that the organizations that do it must have the ability to operate without being told what to do or how to do it by outside entities. They must be independent in that their ability to execute their mission is drawn by people that are voluntarily a part of it or working for their organization, not being subdued into work, or nor do they work for a higher level organization. And they must be neutral. They cannot favor one side over another or one group over another. And it must be humanitarian in that it addresses the actual humanitarian need of the particular community, of the particular population. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was operating through a contract with the Israeli government, so therefore they were not independent. They were operating under the guidance and total direction of the IDF every day, from distribution operations to when we would distribute to what we would distribute. So therefore they were not operating unilaterally, and they were operating on the side of or in favor of or to the beck and call of the IDF. So they were not neutral. And they certainly were not addressing the actual humanitarian need. Out of all of the food that we delivered, We were delivering no other humanitarian aid items, no medicine, no vaccines, no baby formula, no sanitary supplies, nothing other than dried food, not meals, not food ready to eat, not emergency meals that people could eat on location or eat readily. Dried food, dried rice, dried beans, dried pasta, and we were providing them with no water. And when I confronted the leadership about this, why are we not providing them sustainable food that's edible, that's ready to eat in an emergency situation when they do not have the means to cook the food that we're providing them? Why is the food that we're providing them expired and a lot of it spoiled? Much of it infested by rats, or it's been parceled through by inspectors and things have been taken out. Why are we not providing them direct aid and food where we provide them food on site for life-saving nutrition? And why are we not providing them any water? And all of these questions were answered with, well, we're here on a contract. Our contract is with the IDF. The IDF is our client. We do what the IDF say. That's the point that through my time in Gaza working for this organization, that to me, I could no longer be a part of the organization, of the mission and the operation. And it was something that was very difficult for me to choose between doing something, being a part of doing something, or stepping away from it and in a way feeling like I was doing nothing. And I would say that that's what started my activism, not necessarily to be an activist, but as a human being. When you are witness to starvation, forced population displacement, indiscriminate shooting, terror, abuse, not only against people in general, human beings in general, but against non-armed combatants. Non-combatants, unarmed, as a population in an ongoing conflict. And then when you layer that with especially the vulnerable population of those that are being the most affected, those that will not survive, children, the elderly, mothers. And when you see a father carrying their dead child, close to my son's age, when you see a father carrying their dead child and that child died of starvation, nothing can be more imaginable than the dehumanization and the despair and the loss that a father would experience, or a mother would experience, or anyone would experience. The helplessness. And that happens thousands upon thousands upon thousands exponentially in what's going on in Gaza. We've seen now recently, with more information, more of the curtain being revealed of what's happening in Gaza, that the death toll is much, much higher than previously reported or previously disclosed by Israeli government and the IDF. Having been there, having seen it with my own eyes, firsthand, the destruction, the number of Palestinians that I saw that were killed just in the short time that I was there, the totality of the complete leveling of entire city population areas, Rafah, Mawasi, Khan Yunis, large, dense population areas. Looking at the rubble and what was left, it was very clear to me that the death toll was far higher than 67 to 70,000. It was in the hundreds of thousands, likely close to 500,000. I base this not on what somebody else has told me, or because I was influenced on social media and that's now the narrative. These are conclusions that I came to seeing it with my own eyes, based on my experience of 25 years in the military, being in combat all over the world. In Mosul, when we had to fight ISIS. In Raqqa, Syria, in the fight against ISIS. In Afghanistan, in Kabul and Kandahar and Helmand, in the fight against the Taliban. When you see cities laid to waste and in destruction, there's a human toll. There's a cost. Calculating what had happened in Gaza and what I saw with my own eyes, it was very clear to me even then that the death toll, as I said, was close to 500,000, if not more. And we're starting to see that that's the case. So in walking away from working with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I had to balance, or had to come to grips with, leaving and no longer being a part of doing something. And that motivated me and drove me to do something, and that is to speak out of what is happening, to tell the truth, to bring to the world what they aren't hearing. No reporters, no outside media other than the media and the reporters that were in Gaza, who mostly have been killed, or their platforms and their voice have been largely mitigated or shadowed or oppressed on social media. So I didn't realize when I got back, that what I saw and what I experienced as an American on the ground in Gaza at the distribution sites was a unique experience, or necessarily something of value, because Palestinians have been saying this for years. The indiscriminate shooting, the bombing, the starvation, the targeting, the abuse, the oppression. I felt that what I had to say was not anything new or anything that the world hadn't already known. But the value of it coming from the perspective of an individual that the opposition or the hate against what's happening to the Palestinians can't be said, oh, well, you're biased, or, oh, that's propaganda from the Gaza Health Ministry, or that's Hamas propaganda. I had to come out on the record. I had to come out with the truth, and I had to tell as many people as I could, because I firmly believe that in this world and in America, people are inherently good. I do believe that. I do believe that people are inherently good, and that most people want good and would not tolerate or put up what's happening in Gaza to the Palestinians. They just don't know. They don't know what to believe. They don't know what to know. A lot of information that's often confusing. So I wanted to bring it from a perspective of someone that was there on the ground, that saw these incidents face to face with my own eyes, as an American veteran, as someone that doesn't have a bias or an ulterior motive or an agenda to speak out other than humanity. So I did, and that's been the driving force behind me talking to Congress, speaking out, becoming more active in speaking out against this injustice. And what I witnessed in Gaza in total it was more than just seeing destruction and despair and the starvation and the withholding of food. What truly shocks me, and what shocked me then and what shocks me now, what is truly disappointing, is that what is happening to Palestinians right now in Gaza and the West Bank, particularly in Gaza, is not the fog and friction of war or the unintended consequences of conflict. This was planned. What is happening now in Gaza with the forced displacement of the Palestinians is a plan. It was always planned. The systematic starvation and then using food as a further mechanism to forcefully displace the population was planned. It's designed. And as we look right now with the implementation of this peace plan, with the recently announced Board of Peace, this is further evidence and further implementation of a designed plan of ethnic cleansing, genocide, forced displacement. As we speak, bombs continue to drop every day in Gaza. Palestinians continue to be killed, either seeking food, trying to find water, or simply traveling from one point to another, not knowing on the ground where this IDF yellow line is on the ground. And people are still dying, not just from starvation, not just from disease and famine, but from military action that we, the United States, are continuing to back and support. In the middle of a ceasefire, quote unquote, in the middle of all aid supposed to be allowed into Gaza, and it's not. So as we look at this peace plan, rest assured that where we are right now in the implementation of Project Sunrise, the implementation of a peace board with the likes of Marco Rubio, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Tony Blair, and others, all of whom are billionaires who have no experience in diplomacy, who are simply friends of or were previous donors to Donald Trump. So as we look at the implementation of this peace board, rest assured and realize this is not something that we've just come up with to respond to the situation. This was planned. Since 2021, when the Boston Consulting Group laid out plans in coordination with the Israeli government to determine the way to displace the population of Gaza, to do so in a way through military action and through the deprivation of food, to then provide no means to live in Gaza, and then at the height of suffering, offer Palestinians a way out, not by rebuilding their community or empowering them as people or providing them recognition and sovereignty. No, but to offer them the opportunity to leave. And that is exactly what we're seeing right now in Gaza, the Rafah border, the crossing with Egypt. It's open to leave Gaza, but Israel is not allowing any aid into Gaza. The IDF have established checkpoints along this yellow line. And as a Palestinian, if you come to the yellow line with your family and you agree to be biometrically enrolled through a in-the-field biometric enrollment device that the United States produces and provides, you will then be offered the opportunity to leave Gaza. That is not a solution. That is ethnic cleansing. And to any family that agrees to being biometrically enrolled into this database, Palantir runs that database. It goes directly into Palantir. It goes directly to the Israeli government. And now any and every Palestinian that is biometrically enrolled in this is now under the complete digital control of the Israeli government. This is nothing more than a means of digital ethnic cleansing to erase Palestinian society, to remove them physically from Gaza, and then say, well, we didn't force them to leave. They voluntarily left. There's nowhere for Palestinians to live. There's no running water. There's no power. There's no hard-lined electricity. Most Palestinians who are still alive and living live in tentage and ripped apart tarps. And just across the border, as you stand in Rafah encampment, where many of the images we've seen over the last 2 weeks with the winter storm that hit Gaza and the tents falling apart and children dying of hypothermia and open sewage running through the streets and people shivering and dying of the cold and no shelter to protect them from the elements. If you stand in Rafah, a stone's throw away from one end zone of a football field to another, less than 100 yards, are tons and tons and tons of food and thousands of containerized housing units that can house an entire family. And these containerized housing units have already been purchased. They're already loaded on trucks. They can be brought into Gaza and placed. Within 1 day, you can have thousands of units on the ground. And they sit 100 yards across the border, not because they're not available, not because no one's unwilling to bring it, but because Israel won't allow it. And the United States is standing by that. The United States is standing by the continued blockage of all aid going into Gaza. The United States is standing by the continued military action. And now we're not fighting the Israelis. We're not talking about fighting Hamas. They are killing unarmed combatants, populations of people who are simply trying to survive. So May of 2025, on May 12th of 2025, if anybody had asked me if I'd ever be a military contractor or if I'd ever be in Gaza or if I ever would have to speak out against war crimes and that doing so would be considered an act of revolution to speak out against war crimes, I wouldn't have believed it. On May 13th, 2025, when I got a phone call from UG Solutions recruiting me to go, It changed my life forever. And I had a choice. I had a clear choice when I saw what I saw. I had choice A. I could have said nothing, turned the other cheek. Not my responsibility, not my problem. I'm not a Palestinian. I'm not an Israeli. This isn't my conflict. This isn't my problem. I'm here to make money. I'm here as a contractor. This isn't my problem. And I could have continued to remain quiet and gotten paid a lot of money and not be smeared and targeted and have death threats leveled against me or live in fear for the rest of my life. Or I could have did what I did and speak out against what's happening for humanity. And the only consequence on the table, because no one would have known the choice I made. No one really knows what was happening in Gaza with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The only thing on the table between choice A and choice B was my conscience and my soul and my ability for the rest of my life to look myself in the mirror and not be ashamed of myself, or to raise my children and not be ashamed of who I am as a father. Because anybody that has witnessed what I have witnessed in Gaza, that can stand by and not speak out, that could stand by and allow it to happen, that can stand by and say that it's not happening, or that can stand by and say that there's any justification, it's evil. In my opinion, it's an inherent evil. And that's why I've spoke out. Some people have said, "Oh, well, you're leftist activists and you just went there to feed your narrative." Not true. I was active duty military up until March of that year. I was not a leftist activist I'm not a paid protester, nor am I a paid agitator. I have no backing from a political party or a lobby. I have no incentive to do this, to speak out, to continue to speak out, to take the smearing and the death threats and the consequences, other than I could not live with myself knowing that these crimes against humanity, this absolute destruction, ethnic cleansing, erasure of an entire population of people, that to stand by and do nothing is something that I could not live with. So the choice I have is to live life on the right side of history, or to live life as a coward, always knowing that I did the wrong thing. So that's why I continue to speak out. That's why I'm here today. That's why it's so important to me. And that's my motivation in this, is for humanity. And I firmly believe this, that what I saw in Gaza on behalf of how the IDF operated and how UG Solutions personnel operated. UG Solutions, that population of people, is the same population of people that ICE is currently drawing from to recruit ICE agents. And I will tell you this. This is not propaganda. This is not hearsay. Not only have I been involved in the training in my military career, I've seen it in Israel at the National Urban Training Center in Beersheba. That is a joint training center where ICE, DEA, select city police officers, Chicago, New York City, NYPD, and other police departments train in Israel with elements of the Ministry of National Security. The same tactics that I witnessed in Gaza, we are now seeing here. And that is not a coincidence. That is not a mistake. And if we think that that's just something that's going to go away or change on its own, it won't. And I firmly believe that the oppression that we export will come back to our streets and to our neighborhoods. And what happened with Renee Good earlier this month, right, wrong, or indifferent of justified or not, or what side of politics you may be on, or who she was as a person in her personal life, those are the tactics that are being employed. Shoot first and ask questions later. Why does that matter for this conversation? because those are the exact same tactics employed by the IDF in Gaza. And those are the exact same tactics, verbatim, told to us by the Israeli Defense Force when we were going into Gaza. Shoot first, ask questions later. If you're in doubt, shoot, and shoot to kill. And we're seeing that here. So to me, this is more than just Palestine. This is more than just Gaza. This is more than just the West Bank. This is all of us. This impacts every American. This will have an impact on everyone in the world. If what we're witnessing in Gaza, in what the oppression that continues against the Palestinians, is something that we as humanity don't do something about, and not passively, but loud and with determination, it will happen to us. And take it from someone that has been around the world, that has been in countries where people are oppressed, that has fought against oppression on behalf of the oppressed, that has been on the side of oppression as the United States military. It will come back to us, and we will soon be the oppressed. I firmly believe that. And that is not political. That is not some kind of doomsday prophecy. That's the truth. We will see that come back to us, because once we accept genocide, starvation, oppression, dehumanization, once we as a world accept that in normalcy, it's only a matter of time before we see it on our streets. We see it in our neighborhoods. We see it happening to us, to our children, to our family. And it's not that far away. So that's why it's incredibly important for me to continue to speak out, continue to speak up, and continue to inform people of what I witnessed, what I've experienced, and what I think the impact is to us as Americans. So that's my first for the first part of this panel, laying out my story, and very interested in questions, conversation, or any other comments to what I had to say.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's a powerful witness, powerful testimony that you've given us. I have a couple of questions for you. You mentioned that your conscience just wouldn't let you go along with evil. That it was your conscience that compelled you to speak out and to try to live on the right side of history. Tell us, if you would, about some of the building blocks of your conscience. What influences in your life have given you a strong moral conscience, a moral compass that couldn't be compromised by these circumstances? I mean, we all are very aware that there's the vast majority of people would have taken their pay and looked the other way. You did not. And I just wonder if you'd share with us what's the story of the formation of your moral consciousness, your conscience, the things that animate these choices that you've made, these admirable choices?
Well, I was born and raised into a Christian household, Catholic household. And though my upbringing and my Christian values did have a profound impact on me as a human being in terms of my ethics and morals, more so to that has just been the guiding principle of humanity, and that all of us in this world, created in God's image, have value. We're people, from children to fathers to mothers. We all have value. Not value that has to be proven, or value that has a price tag, or value that's wrapped up into your equity or your wealth or your personal value. Value is human beings, period. And when I was in Gaza, and I've often reflected on this, and I've asked myself, was it my subconscious? Was it my conscience? What was it? On the 28th of May, now, the day prior to this, on the 27th of May, we had our very first day of distribution. And 34,000 Palestinians who had been queuing at the security line, when the IDF released them with no control over this crowd, I was on distribution site 1. There were only 20 of us in terms of security contractors. 34,000 Palestinians rushed to this site to get food. As I saw this massive crowd coming towards the site, sprinting from about 800 meters away, 2 laps around a track in distance, I could see them on the horizon. The dust was rising so high it blocked the sky. The ground shook. And I had my rosary in my pocket, and I looked at my rosary and a picture of my son, and I said, this is where it ends. It's been a good life. This is where it ends. 34,000 starving people who we were told prior to this, Hamas, they hate us. They're all bad. And as they fled onto this site, I was greeted with hugs, kisses on the cheek, thank yous, fathers dropping to my feet on their knees, thanking me that we were there to provide them with food, kissing my hands. In the melee of so many people, I was knocked to the ground, not intentionally, and a Palestinian man stopped and picked me up and made sure I was okay. None of us were harmed. They just wanted food. And that kind of dawned on me in terms of, what have we been told? And who have we been told it by? And what's true and what's not? Well, here I stand, right here, in flesh and blood, and I have seen the truth. On the 28th of May, we were on a different distribution site. We were on distribution site 3, which was a little bit closer to the southern edge of Khan Yunis, different population, different group, different population of people that were allowed to come to this site. So the crowd was not as big. But after the Palestinians fled onto this site to capture what food that was left, at the end, there were small children and the elderly, mothers, women that were alone, that were not strong enough or fast enough to get the food boxes. So they were there picking up food off the ground, scraps of food. And this young little boy, his name was Amir, and he came to me and we had a moment. And this young boy with no shoes, dehydrated, starving, his father had been killed in an airstrike. His mother had been separated from him when they were forced evacuated from Khan Yunis. He was living in an encampment in the Khan Yunis camp. He had been separated with the adults, the family that had taken him in the encampment, because on the way to the distribution site that day, the IDF opened fire on the crowd and the crowd spread and he was separated from his family and he only knew to go to the site. And he was there alone, picking up scraps of food. And when he came up to me and he thanked us for the food that he was able to provide, he had. And as I saw him, as he walked away from me towards the exit of this site back into the destruction and the apocalypse of Gaza, I saw him as I walked away, I thought to myself in my head, this boy is not going to survive. This young boy will not survive this war. And I can sit here and I can think to myself, oh, look what we're doing. We're helping. My hands are clean of this. That boy won't survive. And as I sat there and I watched him walk away, a voice very clear to me, just as if someone was standing next to me. And again, I don't know if it was my conscience or my subconscious, a voice in the wind. I don't know. But it was very clear. And it said, do not forget what you have seen here. Don't forget. And it was a commanding voice. And there was no one standing next to me. And that's something that has stuck with me since the 28th of May, 2025. Do not forget what you saw here. And I can't forget. So my values and what in my upbringing, again, raised in a Christian home, Catholic Christian home. And I think my grandmother growing up, I come from I grew up in a Mexican household, very close family. Grandparents are still very much a part of your life throughout your life. My grandmother lived to be 96 years old. And my grandmother always had some very basic principles in the world. Treat other people like you want to be treated. Don't be mean or evil or hurtful out of spite or just for sake. If you can help people, help them. And everything that goes around comes around. And throughout my entire life, I've always felt that all human beings have value. To me, it's not a matter of color, race, gender, ethnicity, creed, religion. We all have value. We all have value. And everyone should be given that basic sense of human dignity and value in this world. Who is to say otherwise? Who is to say that someone else is not as valuable or worthy as someone else, regardless of the money in your pocket or the mansion over your head, or whether or not you live on the street? We all have value. So that's always been a principle that I have abided by.
Anthony, you've also shared with us in your story the rules of engagement that were imposed upon you by the IDF, shoot first, ask questions later, and shoot to kill. I know from yours and my earlier conversations that you also witnessed some abject cruelty from the IDF in terms of the use of dogs. Could you just tell us about that? I had not heard about that until you shared that story, and I think it's illustrative. It illustrates the total disregard for life that's embodied in these rules of engagement, and also the practices of the IDF that you witnessed.
So Gaza, much like any American city, people have pets. There's dogs. There's creatures and critters around. And I experienced this in Iraq and Afghanistan, that when the population is decimated, a lot of the dogs in the population become feral. There's no one to take care of them. They become wild. They breed more dogs. So over the years of this conflict in Gaza, wild feral dogs have become a very big issue, a known and difficult issue to deal with, especially with the spread of rabies. And when I was in Gaza, on the first day I went into Gaza, on the 24th of May, to do a reconnaissance of the distribution sites, we drove through Rafah in the south, and to distribution site number 3, the only way to get to the site. For example, for site 1 and 2, we could go around the city on the outskirts and come in from the coast. To get to site number 3, you had to go through Rafah, through the destruction, through the debris. And there was still active war going on. Bombs were being dropped, buildings were being destroyed. And I saw a dog jaunting down the street, and it had a human arm, like a human's arm in its mouth. And I had asked the IDF, what measures are being taken for this? Because not only is this just completely dehumanizing, but this is also a risk. And I was like, do you shoot them? Do they get corralled up? Like, what do you do? And the IDF soldier that was there, he says, oh, we don't shoot them. We let them live, and we release them into the population. And I didn't really understand the mechanics or the gravity of this. And I was like, it's like, okay, I mean, that's, how do you control them? So, and in the bases in Israel, or excuse me, in Gaza, the Israeli bases in Gaza, where they have combat outposts, they'll have pens of dogs, of the wild feral dogs that they'll keep in groups, intentionally allowing the spreading of rabies. And they'll then release these dogs. They'll put them in trucks, take them into parts of the city, and release them into the city. And they do that intentionally. And they told us, I remember one night at one of the distribution sites, after we had done distribution, there was a lot of, there were dead bodies outside of the site. There was a lot of food left on the ground. And so dogs were surrounding the site. And one of the UG Solutions guards asked, like, hey, can we shoot at these dogs? Because, we might get bit. And the IDF said, no, 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 don't shoot them. And the IDF came and they gathered them up, corralled them up, and took them to one of their bases. And it was, I mean, in a way, it's biological warfare. It's animal biological warfare. It's evil. It's, if you could, you have to go out of your way to design ways to torture people when you're thinking of things like that, because I mean, that's something that, you know, to allow a rabid population into the population to terrorize, kill, maim, or hurt women and children and starving people, that's a whole nother level of evil, in my opinion.
One last question from me, and then we'll begin our full half hour of Q&A with the audience. For those of us that have been in this work for some time, what we've noticed in our own journeys, as well as in those we work with and speak to and engage with, is that whatever view we had of Israel, it changes in radical ways because of what we've seen. And I just wonder, what was your view of Israel before you went? And I mean, how did you understand what Israel was, and how did you look at Israel? And then after you've had this up close and personal experience of the kind of evil that you've described, the kind of cruelty, kind of violence and devastation, I wonder how you now view Israel, and maybe just something about your transformation of viewpoint about the modern state of Israel.
So it's a great question. And prior to going to Israel with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, my view of Israel was, or my knowledge, opinion, and view of Israel is that they're our greatest ally in the region. They're the most moral army in the world. They take every measure to limit human casualties, and it's a horrible and horrendous war, and this is the cost of war, and it's unfortunate, but Israel's doing everything in their power to minimize that. They're a great ally. We should trust them. We do trust them. That was kind of my position going in. And since my position has changed, my opposition or my anti-ness to an entity is not necessarily anti-Israel in terms of all Israelis. It is anti-Zionism, anti-apartheid. The government of Israel, when you hear government officials in the Israel government, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, the commander of the IDF, Netanyahu himself, say things like mowing the grass when it comes to reducing the population in Gaza periodically, or let them all starve, or they're all Hamas, or yes, killing the children in Gaza is justified because they will grow up to be Hamas, kill them all. That isn't Judaism. That's not the Israeli state. That is Zionists. That is those individuals. Just like if you were to consider the Nazi regime of the 1930s and 40s, that was not every German. However, they are the ones in power, and they do represent the Israeli state. Now, it was asked to me once before in a podcast that I was on, does Israel have the right to exist? And the answer to that is no nation as a nation state has a right to exist. That's not codified in international law. People have a right to exist. The Palestinian people have a right to exist. Americans have the right to exist. Israelis have a right to exist, or the populations of people. A nation state does not have an inherent right to exist. And in fact, many nation states throughout the history of modern society have come and gone. What gives a nation state legitimacy to be a nation state is their willingness to cooperate within international humanitarian law, the bounds of their nation state, to respect the sovereignty of other nations. So in terms of Israel's right to exist, I would say that the leadership of Israel are marching Israel down a dangerous road to where they will not have legitimacy as a nation state. And it will come into question, especially when we look at statehood of the Palestinians, or a two-state solution or not. If one cannot exist with the other, or one cannot coexist, well, I would think that it would be showing that the state of Israel, not the biblical sense of the land of Israel, but the state of Israel, the nationalistic state of Israel, has demonstrated that it does not respect sovereignty. They will not cooperate with their neighbors. Everyone is in danger. They will not cooperate, and they will not abide by international law. They will not abide by international norms, and they don't seek peace or stability in their region. They seek domination and control. And to me, that's something where you should question a state's legitimacy. Again, right to exist of a nation state is a misnomer. That doesn't exist. Israel does exist. And of the right to exist, they do exist. The justification to exist as a governing nation state is bound by how you behave as a nation state. And I think that that's something that the Israeli government has drawn into serious question and doubt.
Thank you so much for all those answers and for your compelling witness to us, Anthony. I really want to get into the questions. Let me just remind, as Kate had said earlier, if you have a question, you can do as Laura has done. I see in her hand, and also the Shofis, there's the little hand icon down at the bottom of the screen if you're used to using that. If you also would like to get in and can't figure that out, or not used to using it, you can just raise your hand and I can see that as well. I'm going to do my very best to get everybody included. Let me just say that since there are a number of us, and I think we would all like a chance to interact with Anthony, please be brief, get right to your question, and let's begin with Laura, and of course unmute when you're ready to speak, and then remute yourself after you've had your moment with Anthony. Laura, please.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you very much, Anthony. One thing that has occurred to me is at this moment in time, we may have an opportunity we wish to perhaps broaden the base of people who might come out in support of the Palestinians and against the aggression of the U.S. state abroad. I feel like with ICE and with DHS and with so many groups being so oppressive within our country now, if we could do a better job of illustrating the linkages. I was wondering this morning, how many Americans know that ICE has a permanent office in Israel and DHS has a permanent office in Israel? And it seems to me that someone like you, who I think might have access to people that, those of us in the peace camp probably wouldn't, both because of your military background and what you've directly experienced with ICE, that maybe people like you might have a bit of a role in. For example, we're seeing a lot of demonstrations now against ICE. And I just feel like your experience of seeing ICE and seeing in Israel the kind of training they do, that you might be very valuable in that. And I was wondering if you've been approached or if you've approached anyone, because we've always had this problem of having a very small base of support. And it's, the demonstrations get smaller and smaller all the time. So I was just wondering if you see a role for yourself in that. That's all.
I certainly do. And I certainly find myself becoming more involved in that role. And what I've experienced in the environment or the ecosystem of what I've stepped into in terms of speaking out against things or being more involved in things, especially when it comes to what we're seeing in domestically, is that on one side, and I'm not going to say left or right or on this side, on one side you have extreme hateful vitriol of things like F ICE or to death with ICE or kill them all or they're terrorists. And then on another side, you have vitriol in the other extreme of anyone that protests against them is a domestic terrorist. And if you say anything bad against the government, you're a bad person. And rationality, and I believe the majority of Americans, lie somewhere in the middle, in that the the policies and what we're seeing currently in our streets with federal agencies. It's not just ICE. It's the US Border Patrol. It's other agencies within the Department of Homeland Security. It's not just ICE. In that we have to those that speak out against it have to be informed in terms of, why is ICE as a federal agency transforming into this violent, militant, oppressive organization? Where's the root of that? Where's that coming from? Well, if you peel that back one layer, and this is not hyperbole, this is not speculation, this is a fact. They train in Israel with the IDF. If I trained under a certain teacher for 5 years of my life and came into the world with this new idea of how I should interact in the world, and it was a certain way, you could say, well, you learned it from that person. Our agents on the street, and you think about it with ICE especially, their training curriculum has been cut down drastically. I think it's just simply a matter of weeks now. So they're getting, through the gonculator of recruiting, trained, and put out on the streets. And the only exposure to this training that they're getting is that of which and I won't say the IDF, we say the IDF writ large, but within Israel, under the Ministry of Defense, you have the Israeli Defense Forces, but you also have the National Ministry of Security, which is where their police, their internal police and border force falls under. So not every force within Israel is IDF. So to say that they train with the IDF, they do, but they're trained by the National Ministry of Security with the gendarmerie militarized forces, the forces that you see in the West Bank primarily. So when you see those tactics that are being trained and how they're being employed, it's clear to me it's not vitriol or it's not rhetoric, it's true. So how do we become more involved? Well, I'll tell you, if any of us think that our congressmen and our congressmen staff, professional staffers are informed or are more informed than we are, I will tell you that they are not. Part of my time going to Washington is advocating, airing grievance, protesting, but it's also educating and informing. I had a conversation with the the Legislative Affairs senior staff member to Congressman Brad Knott. That's North Carolina District 13. That's my district. And I went to, I downloaded his voting record. I downloaded his funding, and I looked, okay, well, he takes money from AIPAC. He takes money from this group. He takes money from that group. He hasn't voted on this. He did vote on that. He's abstained from this. Okay, facts, facts, and facts. So when we had a conversation in his office with him this week, we spoke to his senior legislative affairs senior staffer, his LA, and he didn't know any of these things. And I was like, why does the congressman take money from AIPAC? Well, what's AIPAC? It's like, are you kidding me? Why has the congressman not voted on block the bombs, either yay or nay? He's abstained. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Like you're on the congressman's staff. So what that tells me is that that's not the congressman's priorities. What are his priorities? Those are the questions that we have to ask and that we have to hold congressmen accountable for, both senators and representatives, whether that's locally here in the state in their state offices or going up to DC. But we must continue to speak out. We must continue to inform. And I think we must stay away from the getting down in the dirt of insults and hyperbole and vitriol, because all that does is further divide us. And I've seen it a lot. I've seen it in, like, for example, in protests when I participated in the Remove the Regime protest in Washington, D.C., the Capitol Police, who were in charge of the security for that, did not in any way impede us, did not in any way try to prevent us, and did everything within their power, within the scope of law and duty, to allow us to peacefully protest and exercise our constitutional right. So if somebody tells me that all police are this, or that all activists are this, or that all of people that think this way are that way. I'm not one that believes that. And I think that we have to stop thinking that way, and we have to start having conversations that are based on facts and rationality, not emotion. Because I think the emotion right now in our country is what's ripping us apart.
Thank you, Anthony. Let's move on to the Shofis, Ted and Sharon Shofi. I see your hands up, friends.
Yes, I had a question I think you might be in a unique position to answer. We were in Israel for a year in 2000. And since then, from the year 2000, we know about, to now, to 2026, in that time, we know for a fact opinion polls of the Israeli public have drastically changed. When we were there, the numbers were something like 40 were definitely against Palestinians, kind of, and 60% were not. Now the numbers are completely reversed to the point of numbers like 80% actually dehumanize the Palestinians. And so what I'm asking you is this, you obviously have trained yourself, many people, and you've been trained in the military. And I know from way back in World War II, et cetera, some of the training is to dehumanize to some extent the enemy. So, it's not all roses. So you need to make at least the soldier feel like they're not quite human. And that's been the case. But now it looks like maybe partially because of their universal draft in Israel, is 80% that actually have dehumanized totally the Palestinians. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
The psychological component of warfare is one of the most important aspects, probably more important than dropping bombs or killing, is psychological operations, psychological warfare. Because that's how you truly take control or manipulate a population, is not through bombs, but through the mind. The psychological aspect of dehumanizing Palestinians has been a critical component of Israel's strategy in Gaza for years, and especially since post October of 7th, 2023, Operation Gideon's Chariots, which is the primary operation on the ground in Gaza, has had a very robust psychological warfare plan to it. And to the point that you brought up, even to the American soldier, when we train for combat, we train to see the enemy as inhuman. We train, when I remember in the early days when you would go to the range and they still, we were still fighting a very Cold War centric doctrine, the plastic pop-up targets. We called them crazy Ivans. You don't see that as a human being. You see it as a crazy Russian that you should kill. Same thing with the global war on terror. The ignorance towards Islam around the world and Arabs in general, not necessarily in everybody's mind, but that was certainly a component of the psychological aspect of being able to kill. And it's very difficult to bring yourself to kill someone when you see them as a human being or you see them as equal to you. And not everyone can go to Gaza. Not everybody can walk the streets. But in all the war that I've seen, in all the places I've been, in all of the dehumanization and the lowest of lows that I've seen and experienced, I guarantee that if I were to take anyone and we could magically transport ourselves into Gaza City and walk down the street, you would leave with a different perception. And a lot of the IDF who have gone into Gaza that are part of the fighting come out with a totally different perspective than what they went in with. There is a understanding in having aggression towards your enemy, but when you've been told over and over and over again that they're all the enemy, from an infant child to a 90-year-old man and everybody in between. They're the enemy. That's not true. And when you come face to face with that reality, and you have to come face to face with what you've been told and what you believe, and you have to change that paradigm, it's not easy. And it's hard to break. But I can tell you from my perspective, going into Gaza and witnessing what I witnessed, I didn't see one person armed out of all the people that I saw in Gaza. Never. Never saw one person make threats towards me in any way. They aren't all Hamas. Many of them are simply families, mothers and fathers and children trying to live their lives. So the psychological aspect is always utilized in warfare. The United States, we do it too. And in the aspect of the dehumanizing of your enemy, when that transcends to dehumanizing the entire population, that has impacts. And I've been reading a lot of reports lately of more and more IDF soldiers that serve in Gaza that are leaving with a much different perception and questioning what they're doing. So to the average citizen that may think, yeah, kill them all, it's right, having this hatred towards the other, when you come face to face with it, your feelings change. And realistically, not everyone can face it face to face, which is why I want to try as much as I can to share my experience, to share with people that as a hardened combat soldier who has fought in 4 wars over 12 times in combat throughout my career, and that you cannot look at the entire population of people as the enemy.
Thank you, Anthony. We're about halfway through our set aside time for Q&A. I see 3 hands up. Alexis Kennedy. Alexis, good to see you. You're up next.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, David. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I had a question about taking a step back from, you said you were in the military up until March of 2025. And I wanted to think about in 2024, Aaron Bushnell, an active member, killed himself. And I wanted to know, what was the response, at least do you see, in the military seeing one of their own kill himself in the response to what he was seeing, and how that could help or not help? Because I think there is so much information out, and your moment of break was also in 2025. How do we break into the military to make the changes? Because I'm not seeing a big push on our military standing up, because we know American troops are in Gaza. We know that they're in Israel and they can bear witness to what's going on. Why, at least, have you not seen a huge break of our own military? If the IDF is doing it, why are we not seeing a flood of our own military? And what is the environment that's preventing them from doing it?
Well, particularly to U.S. military in Gaza, they are operating in Israel at a civil military coordination center between U.S. soldiers and IDF soldiers. And even then, the IDF are restricting American soldiers from going in on the ground. And that's causing a lot of friction and a lot of friction between American soldiers and the IDF, because I'm quite sure that when we actually have American soldiers, boots on the ground in Gaza, the thing is that in Gaza, 53% of Gaza is under the complete control of the IDF. There are no Palestinians. It's just military. So unless you have the ability to go into the areas where the Palestinians are, where the fighting is, like I did, having the opportunity to go into the combat zone, you don't see it. You don't see it firsthand. So once American soldiers and other international forces are able to go in and they see it firsthand, I think there will be more people speaking out. But the the willingness of soldiers to speak out against atrocities is something that has always bewildered me. And then if you look at as far back in Vietnam, when, in the My Lai massacre, you had an entire company of infantry soldiers killing unarmed villagers, murdering them. And only one person, a helicopter pilot who was flying in to bring in supplies and witnessed this happening and put his helicopter between the civilians that were being shot at and the American soldiers that were shooting them, and who then came out and blew the whistle on this egregious war crime. He was the only one. And then through testimony, you hear these soldiers saying, not denying what they did, but not thinking there was anything wrong with it. What has become increasingly dangerous in our military through the global war on terror is this warrior class where we think that war is the answer and violence and anger and punishment is celebrated, and we should celebrate that. And it's in the symbology in our military where most military units they want to represent who they are with a Punisher skull, or a skull with a dagger, or it becomes this militaristic evil kind of aggression. And in the American military, I think over time we've become desensitized to the thought that, this is. I'll tell you, the majority of the IDF, of what they see they're doing in Afghanistan or in Gaza, the reason they don't speak out against it is because they feel that what they are doing is justified and right. And in the United States, we've done much of the same thing in the villainization and the dehumanization of Hamas, but to characterize the entire population of Gaza as they're all Hamas. And that comes out of US rhetoric too. That has come out of the mouths of US government officials. That has come out of the mouths of people like Senator Tom Cotton or Congressman Randy Fine. That has come out of the mouths of American lawmakers, that they're all Hamas. We have to kill all of them. So when you think about the US military, the very few that are there that have not yet gone in, there are many that think that it's okay. It's acceptable. It's justified. Yeah, it's horrible. God, it is horrible and it's bad. And we wish we didn't have to do it, but it's justified and it's okay. And the truth is that it's not justified, and that it's not okay, and that it's unacceptable. And throughout history, you can see time and time and time. In Iraq, numerous instances in Iraq where soldiers committed war crimes, and it took one person to come out and say, look at this. Abu Ghraib, for example. I don't think anyone would argue how US soldiers behaved against prisoners in Abu Ghraib was in any way justifiable, acceptable. It was unlawful. And it wasn't until one person came out and spoke against it. One person. So time and time again throughout history, I see that very few are willing to speak out against the group, to speak out against the tribe, if you will, because it's very isolating. Like for me in speaking out, people, Green Berets that I served with for a career are like, oh, I can't believe that you're saying that what Israel's doing is bad against these horrible people. And I'm like, I saw children being shot. How do you justify that? So I think the dehumanization tactics and techniques that are being employed against the Palestinians, it works on us too.
Thank you.
Good. Sorry. Ed Niezolowski, I see your hand up. Please ask your question.
Yes, yeah, thanks for letting me speak. Well, first of all, I just want to thank Anthony for that amazing presentation. I mean, just incredibly passionate and articulate. And, my viewpoint of Israel in many ways was similar to his, because for years, I just kind of threw up my hands because there's just so much contradictory information. But I've been involved with a group called Veterans for Peace in Binghamton, New York. And so I've been kind of inundated myself with trying to make sense out of that part of the world. So you had spoken of resistance within the IDF, and via email, I was contacted by, I think it's called the Resistance Network. And I have, trying to give them a little bit of support. And it's IDF soldiers, they realize, they've got to go a different route. The other group I want to mention is, as far as resistance within Israel, it's called Rabbis for Human Rights. They have formed human shields around Palestinian olive groves to protect them from, the Zionist settlers on the West Bank. And that's another thing I want to mention, is that there's just been thousands of olive trees that have been destroyed. It's another weapon, using food as a weapon. It also is a way of destroying the Palestinian culture.
Anthony, any comment that you'd like to make about Ed's remarks?
Yeah, one thing I think is another critical effort within the operations, Israeli operations, not only in Gaza, but the West Bank, is not only the physical removal or eviction or eradication, but it is the cultural erasure. And another example of that, obviously, with the olive trees don't just simply represent a way of income and a way of life and an agrarian society. They represent the people. It's part of the culture. Olive trees take hundreds of years to grow to the point to where they begin producing at scale. So families and generations have upkept and kept these olive trees. So when people go in and destroy them, you're not only destroying just simply a tree planted in the ground, you're destroying heirloom, you're destroying legacy. Another thing, and what I've personally witnessed to that is, if you look in Gaza, and anybody can go up on Google Maps and look this up, the main road that goes through Gaza from south to north is the Salah ad-Din Road. This road goes from Cairo through the Sinai. It comes up through Egypt. It crosses in. It's where the Rafah crossing is on Salah ad-Din Road. That comes into Gaza. It goes through Gaza, and it makes its way to Damascus. It's the road to Damascus. It's the road of which Saul the Apostle was on when he had his awakening, the road to Damascus. It is that road. That road has been there since 450 BC. And it's been part of the Silk Trade route. It connects the Asian or the Central Asian Levant to Central Asia. And it's inherently Palestinian. It's been in their land. It's theirs. Israel has destroyed it, scraped it from the earth. It no longer exists. They have destroyed it, demolished it, ripped up the asphalt, and have scraped every bit of existence of it from the earth. That is not about military operations. In fact, Israel should want to keep the Salah ad-Din Road, because it would be an excellent logistics point through north and south through Gaza if you ever intended to rebuild Gaza. By destroying it in that way, they are erasing history. They are erasing the Palestinian history, because if you go back and you read about the history of the Salah ad-Din Road and when it was built in 450 BC, the people that it speaks of on that land are Palestinians. So if you erase the history, you erase the people. So not only in the West Bank, but we're seeing it in Gaza as well.
Thank you, Anthony. Friends, we're close to our time. I see two other hands up. Let's take those two questions and then take a reading if we need to continue. I see Lila and then also Bernie Davis. Lila, you're up next. Please go forward.
Thank you. I will be brief. I just want to mention up front that I think this audience, if they are not already tuned in to Beyond Israelism, which is by Simone Zimmerman, it's really excellent. And I have only listened to half of this podcast with Yuli Novak, who is the director of Bet Salem, which is the largest humanitarian organization, anti-Zionist organization in Israel. But she talks about how she was born into apartheid and how she was born into racism and how she just never even interacted at all with Palestinians. So she speaks to how this culture developed, and I think it's an excellent talk, and I think a good partner to this talk. I want to thank you, Anthony, so much. This has been so helpful and so enlightening. And you mentioned speaking to members of Congress, and my question is, can you provide us insights to how we might be helpful to you to help open the ears and open the hearts of our Congress people? Anything that would dovetail with your efforts or with congregations, or any way we might help you, because it's so powerful what you have shared today.
Well, I think that there's many different approaches to corresponding with Congress. You can always write to them. You can always go to the local office. In every district, your congressman has a local office in that district. So, for example, Brad Knott, who is my congressman for the North Carolina 13th district, he has offices in Raleigh, Lillington, down further south in Spout Springs. You can go to those offices and talk to his staffers. Maybe sometimes he's there if he's doing constituent work. And then, of course, you can write, you can email, you can call, but you can also go to Congress. And I know for many, this seems like it's too much, or it's not possible, but it is possible, and it's quite easy, and it doesn't cost a lot. You don't have to have a special pass. You don't have to coordinate. You don't have to get special permission. You can walk right into the halls of Congress any day of the week. Even if you just wanted to go to Congress on a Tuesday afternoon and have brunch in the cafeteria, you can do that. You, as an American citizen, there's no restricted access. You can talk to your congressman. You can leave petitions or notes right in their office for their staff. You can take a church group. If you as a church travel up there with 10 or 15 people and talk to members of Congress. They will hear you. They may not always listen, but they will hear it, and they will never turn you away. And the way I see it is that I've had, a lot of folks have come up to me recently and have been like, "Thank you for what you do. I wish I could do more, but I'm just not political." The truth is, in America, in the United States, we are all political. If you vote, if you have ever voted in your life, you are political. We have demonized the concept of political by meaning that you're either of a certain party or that you have some kind of fervent opinion. And that's not what political is. Political is that you take active interest in the politics of your nation. If you vote, you are political. There's nothing wrong with or being anti-American or being insensitive about talking to your elected officials about what are important to you as a constituency base, whether that's taxes, healthcare, or not wanting our tax dollars spent on a genocide. The information out there, I think what shies many people away from going to their congressman, whether it's local or in DC, is thinking that, well, their congressman knows more than they do. And, they don't know, that they feel insecure about wanting to talk about these topics. And that's not true. The truth is, we know more than they do about the topics because we live it. We experience it. We're on the end of the suffering. And a lot of these topics that are important to you, you can inform them on. They may not know, or they may not know the pulse of their constituency base. You can go to either the House of Representatives website or the Senate website. Both are accessible and easy to access. You don't have to have a password. They're open source. and you can look up any congressman and see their voting record. Any Congress, it's not secret. Right now, you could type in your congressman from your district and click on their website in the House of Representatives, and you will see their voting record. And if you look at their voting record in the Congress, if you see a lot of things that they did vote for that you're like, well, that's not what we put that person in Congress. Or if there's a lot of things that you think that they should vote for that they voted no against, in a lot of cases, you'll see that a lot of congressmen, when there's controversial topics like blocking the bombs or allowing aid in, they vote A. You can vote yay, nay, or A. And A is they didn't vote. So if you have a congressman that is in Congress that we pay $275,000 a year in salary, and they only have to work half the year, and then in the times that they are working, they choose to abstain from a vote, I think they should be accountable to the American people. Look up the information, educate yourself, and go to their offices or approach them with hard questions. Mr. Congressman or Mrs. Congressman, why did you not vote on HR 3565 when it was brought to the floor? Do you not care about what's happening? Do you not care about the genocide? Why didn't you vote? They should provide you an answer. We have to demand answers. I personally like the approach of going to Congress. I make a list of congressmen to see. I go to their offices. If I want to get time with them, like specifically with that congressman, I coordinate ahead of time to get on their calendar. And if they're not available, I speak to their staff. And oftentimes, going to DC, you'll also benefit from going to the cafeteria, and you'll see your congressman or senator right there getting a coffee, and you can talk to them. Or you'll see them in the hall and you can talk to them. Or you can go by their office when you in between visiting other offices and say, hey, I'm from Florida 23. This is my congressman. Does he happen to have a minute? And sometimes they will. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into offices without an appointment and the representative is there, and they're happy to pull up a chair and talk. They may not agree with what I have to say. They may not do anything about what I have to say, but they'll listen. And that's where it starts, in my opinion.
Thank you, Anthony. Bernie, you're up next, and then I also see Kathy and Jerry Marcos. Let's make these last two the final questions. Bernie, please.
First off, I want to thank you very much for what you've shared, and most especially, I want to thank you for your humanity. And I'm struck as I listen to you of an African proverb that says a person is a person because of persons. So what I want to thank you for additionally is the humanity that you raise up in all of us with your witness and what you've shared. And that just seems to me to hit at such a spiritual core of connection that I wonder if you could share just a little bit more, invite you to share a little bit more, that I think you have a lot to share on how to be able to help others become aware of and develop their humanity who've been closed to hearing this perspective.
Particularly in American society, I think that drawing parallels to what we're seeing here in our country, I think that no matter where someone sits in partisan politics, they can agree that what's happening in our country is not the way we want to go. Even if they think that it's justified, it's not the way we want to go. And I think now is a very good time to draw those parallels to informing people about Palestine, about Gaza, especially about the West Bank. Think about what we're seeing in the West Bank right now. And how can you not draw the parallels to what we're seeing on the streets of America? So I think it's, as an example, I'm in addition, outside of being, someone that speaks out against what I'm speaking out against, I'm a normal North Carolinian American. I'm a father, I'm a husband. I go to church, go to the grocery store, and I once had a guy walk up to me in Walmart who I'd never met, and he said to me, he's like, "Oh, you're that guy who's been, bad talking Israel." And I was like, "Excuse me?" I was like, "Nice to meet you. I mean, what's your name?" And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he's like, "Oh, well, you're bad mouthing Israel." And I was like, "Well, have you seen any of the things I said? Because if you do, you'll see that I'm not bad mouthing Israel. I'm speaking out against calling a genocide wrong." I was like, "What do you think about a genocide?" And he was like, "Well, it's not a genocide." I was like, "According to who? According to who is it not a genocide?" "Well, just because the UN says it doesn't mean it's true." I said, "Well, the United Nations definition of genocide was adopted by the United States in 1948. And that definition of genocide is codified in our law in US Code 18, Section 1092, genocide. It's in our law. So, yes, it is against US law. It is against international law. So, if you stand for rule of law society, why should our laws not apply to us and to what we're in part in doing?" And he was like, "Well, I never heard of that." So standing right there with my phone, we Googled it. We just typed in USC 18, Section 1092. It came up. We went to the official US government, to the US government webpage to pull it up. And he read it and he was like, "I'll be damned. I didn't know that." So part of it is taking the opportunity to inform people and not shying away from the hard conversations. I particularly enjoy going to places and talking in conversations where I know going in, the group doesn't agree with me. Talking to ourselves with people that agree is great. It's reinforcing, and we share our ways to continue the message. But what really matters is going to the places and talking to people that disagree with you, and educating them in a way that's respectful, that's dignified, and showing them like, "Okay, well, why do you think that way? Tell me why. I'm interested to know why you think that way." And most of the time, you will find that it's due to not knowing, simply not knowing.
Thank you, Anthony. Jerry and Kathy Markatos, see your hand.
Thank you. Well, really appreciate the strengths that you have shared with us today, and the practical side that you just outlined. I have to mention a bill that was just passed in this month, HR 7006, and a couple who are on this are with us today here had forwarded it, and it pointed out that this bill just locked in an attitude preventing funding of UNRWA, and locked in opposition to the survival, really, of Palestinian people in way after way. And I looked it up, and I just typed in "find Palestine" because I couldn't. It was solidifying attitudes based on the term terrorist. Now, what that reminded me of was that many of us have seen security camera images, video of IDF forces going in and destroying equipment in human rights organizations in Israel. And all of these organizations, maybe there's an exception, but I think it's clear to say that any effort of that kind has been categorized as terrorist. And I guess we can roll our eyes and think, "Oh, it's too ridiculous. How could anybody really take this seriously?" But that legally makes possible what was passed in HR 7006. And it is just a death sentence for so many people in the so-called Holy Land. And it's such a challenge to bring this up, to work on it. And I have to say, there's a positive I went through and I searched the entire list to find how our North Carolina representatives voted, and there was one nay vote. And I hope it was over the Palestine issue. It probably was. Valerie Fouché was the sole House member out of all the representatives of North Carolina. Now, one, Greg Murphy did not vote. He voted A, as you say. But I'm just wondering, I mean, this is the mountain we have to climb. And I wonder, maybe you've already answered this, that we just have to keep visiting and keep talking and being there. Do you have any further comments about this kind of legislation? And if anything has occurred to you about this one?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That was an important piece of legislature that I wish more people paid attention to. And, you know, when you think about the process, right, how a bill becomes a law, right? In the House, a congressman proposes it. A congressman and their staff, they write a House resolution, an HR. Mm-hmm. And they write that HR. It can be, for example, House Resolution 3565 is a resolution to stop providing Israel with offensive munitions utilized in Gaza or in the Palestinian territories. That resolution then has to be sponsored by somebody. So typically the sponsoring congressman is the person that wrote it. Not always, most of the time. And then they present it to the House. Here you go, House of Representatives. I'm the congressman from North Carolina 13. I present this resolution. And it moves forward for a vote. And what you'll see as it moves forward for that vote is that's where people like you and I come in. That's where lobbyists come in. That's where political action committees like PACs come in, is that before it goes to a vote, they're going to their congressman and saying, hey, you better vote yes on this, or hey, you better vote no on this. And on this particular resolution, as it went through the process of garnering votes or garnering support on either side of it before it went to a vote, you know who was up in the Capitol every day walking the halls of Congress with a checklist, marking off congressmen that they talked to specifically about that HR? AIPAC.
AIPAC, oh, sure.
Every day. So when you ask yourself, how do you do it? Well, that's how you do it. You go to Congress, and it doesn't necessarily take a PAC to do it or a lobbyist to do it. It takes concerned citizens and people to go and say, hey, Congressman, why, HR 3565 is coming up for a vote. You have not indicated which side you're on. Are you for or against it? In some cases, you'll find, which HR is that? Which one's that? I guarantee you that in this HR 700 going forward, that unless it wasn't for AIPAC going and informing that congressman as to what that was, and then influencing them into which way they should vote, it wouldn't have passed in the way it did. It comes down to people taking action, and we can either sit back and let the PACs do it, or we can do it. We are just as powerful in number as any of these PACs are.
If I could add one thing, I suspect that the fact that there is a candidate opposing Fouché in the primary, and so whenever we hear a voice within the party, whichever party, saying enough is enough, this has to change, then that can affect the vote of the person who is in Congress. That's my suspicion on this. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's an excellent observation, and I agree.
Friends, we have been treated to a very rich hour and a half, and many of you, with your questions, drew out from Anthony some of the important insights that he has to share with us. And Anthony, we are so grateful for your presence and for your testimony. Very powerful. And friends, I would just like to ask that everybody unmute themselves and we give Anthony a round of applause. And if we wait just a minute until everyone has had a chance to unmute, he can actually hear us clapping, thanking him for his time. Let's...
Thank you so much. You should get the Peace Award.
Oh, this is the
Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, friends. That so
I just
many
want
are
to close
here.
by saying one quick thing that
Please.
for everyone to remember, your voice matters, whether it's a voice talking to someone in church, talking to a friend on the phone, talking to someone about it that's interested, talking on a webinar, talking to people, whether it's talking to someone in your community or someone up in Congress, your voice matters. Always remember that.
Thank you, Anthony. And let me just say that we have recorded this, and it will be in a few days up on our website. If you'd like to share it with other people, please do. And just to reiterate what Anthony was saying, let's all stay active and connect with other people who are doing this work, and be willing to keep it going. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mark.
David.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Varun.
Kate,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
Joyce's Voices for Justice in Palestine.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Lead a meeting.